Hello, everyone. Today we are together with Mr. Cenk Uygur. He is the host of famous internet show, The Young Turks, and he's also the presidential candidate for Democrat Party and 2024 elections. Welcome, sir, again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
First of all, I like to start with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. As we all know, this is not something that started very recently. It's a conflict that's going on for decades. But we have seen a major difference this time, especially on the polarization of the Western media. This time, not only the pro-Israeli voices was coming out, but also pro-Palestinian voices was coming out, and you were one of them. So, do you think that the information Iron Dome has been broken, that we are able to hear the pro-Palestinian voices more than before?
Yes, definitely. So in the old days, only 100% pro-Israeli voices would have been heard in American media and politics. And it didn't matter if you were a Democrat or Republican. And it didn't matter what channel you were on, you would only hear the Israeli side. And unfortunately, American media had a terrible history of treating Palestinians and Muslims as non-human, as not important. Their lives didn't matter at all. And now, in an incredible turnaround, American media and even some politicians, but politicians are further behind, are starting to treat Palestinians like they're human beings. And what's leading that turnaround is young voters in America. And so the young cannot stand to see the Palestinians being brutalized like this and being killed like this. And what is great about this development, another great thing about this development, is that it's not just young Muslim Americans, it's young Christian Americans, young Jewish Americans. They're all getting together and saying, no, no more, no more. And it's having a big effect. Joe Biden used to have a huge lead with younger voters. Now he's losing younger voters to Donald Trump. And there's no way a Democratic candidate can win without younger voters. Normally, Democrats have big leads with younger voters. Now that that lead is gone and Trump is now leading, Biden has almost no chance of winning the U.S. election. And not only that, there's Arab Americans in Michigan. And just through sheer luck, Michigan happens to be one of the 5 most important states in American politics. And now Biden's popularity has dropped from over 70% approval rating among Arab Americans to down to 15%. So Michigan's gone. Trump's going to win Michigan. And so at this point, supporting Israel 100% is probably going to cost Joe Biden the election.
Okay. The Israeli land offensive is continuing for more than a month at this point. The humanitarian result was horrendous. It caused a lot of civilian deaths. It caused a lot of children to pass away, unfortunately. But there are some talks about the ceasefire that continues. Maybe not enough, but still some sort of pressure is coming from the Western world. How do you think that this land of offensive is going to end up with? Do you think that Israel is going to achieve the goals they set in the beginning of this, or you think that this is going to get worse for Israel overall?
Yeah, Israeli leaders like Netanyahu set impossible goals on purpose. They say we're going to win when we know Hamas has been eradicated. Well, how do you know if Hamas has been wiped out? Do they come out and raise their hand and say, oh, I've been wiped out? Are Palestinians who have no weapons, innocent civilian Palestinians, are they supposed to rise up against armed Hamas? All of these standards are impossible, and they're purposely impossible because it's clear now from Israeli government officials, they're saying it out in the open in public, that they plan to take Gaza back. And they're planting Israeli flags where they bombed buildings. And we don't know if there's graves underneath, basically, of people who were buried in that rubble, and putting the Israeli flag on top of it is deeply offensive. And they put it all over Gaza now. But this is a disastrous course of action, not just for the Palestinians, but for the Israelis. I think that they have lost the world, and reactions range from Muslims throughout the world being enraged at the idea of Israel taking Gaza back and occupying the Palestinians for how much longer? They've already occupied them for 56 years. How long are you going to keep these people prisoners? It's disgusting what's happening. So, but it's not just Muslims across the world. Now they're losing the West. They're even losing America. And so they keep wanting to pick a bigger and bigger fight and a bigger war. Netanyahu keeps agitating to start a war with Lebanon and with Iran. But what happens if America pulls back? I know they think it's impossible and they think they're invincible. But what if America pulls back? And now it's totally possible that America will. And then now all of a sudden Israel is fighting Iran and Lebanon and Syria and the Palestinians and maybe even the Houthis in Yemen. So what are they going to do? This is an actual danger to Israel, let alone the Palestinians. But Netanyahu is a monster. He profits from war. He wants more and more war. And he doesn't care how many Israelis are killed, let alone Palestinians. If they try to keep Gaza and they keep brutalizing the people inside Gaza like this, the world will not stand for it. I don't know what form that takes, but Israel is used to never being challenged. When they get challenged by the world, it is going to be an interesting phenomenon and something we haven't seen in a long, long time.
Yeah, well, you said that United States might pull out the support to a certain extent, of course. But Mr. Joe Biden was a politician that said if Israel, in fact, didn't existed, we had to invent that. How is it possible for Biden or any other American politician to pull support from Israel?
Yeah, well, look, Biden has been 100% in the pocket of Israel his entire career. So it doesn't matter if Israel had a left-wing government or a right-wing government. Joe Biden was going to do whatever the government of Israel told him to do. And so I wish that weren't the case. And I don't want people to make assumptions based on that. It's unfortunately in American politics, there's a couple of different factors. The evangelical Christians, those are the most fundamentalist Christians, they believe in supporting Israel 100%. And they think that the Armageddon, where everyone dies, is going to start in Israel, and that's why they have to support Israel. But then in their plan, all the Muslims and Jews are killed. Of course, some Jewish Americans support Israel historically, but again, among younger Jewish Americans, they're the ones leading the rebellion now inside America, saying no more. And what they keep saying over and over again is not in our name, not in our name. Okay. And so I love those Jewish Americans that are leading that rebellion among the young. And then, of course, there's defense contractors, and they make a lot of money when there's any conflict in the Middle East. And then finally, the oil companies. When there's conflict in the Middle East, prices go up, and they make billions of dollars in extra profits. These are the forces that control American politics. Whether it's Joe Biden or the Republicans, it's the same, because in America, that we legalize bribery. And so the Supreme Court said it's okay to give millions of dollars to American politicians to spend on their campaigns, which they oftentimes spend on themselves. So America's the only country that's legalized bribery. And ever since they legalized bribery, we've always been in favor of more wars in the Middle East because of these factors. So it's not that I think Joe Biden is going to turn around. No. But Joe Biden, now, if he's still the candidate at the end of the primary process, I'm running against him. There are two other people running against him. And if he's still the candidate, he's almost definitely going to lose, because you cannot win without younger voters, and you cannot win without Michigan. So then supporting Israel is what ironically will end Joe Biden's career. And Donald Trump is I'm not in favor of Donald Trump. He's in the other party. I think he's a terrible guy. He's also said terrible things about Muslims and continues to say terrible things about Muslims and Palestinians. But he doesn't like Netanyahu because he thinks Netanyahu didn't give him enough credit for some of the killings that they did together. And because Netanyahu didn't lie about the 2020 election, Trump is, of course, a maniac, a total lunatic. And so, but he doesn't like Netanyahu. So if Netanyahu says the wrong thing, Trump is crazy. He might pull Israel's funding. And there's another factor here that people don't know. Sheldon Adelson is an American who owned casinos in Las Vegas, but also in China. And he gave Donald Trump's super PACs $100 million in both the 2016 election and the 2020 election. Part of the reason that Trump was so pro-Israel was because of that one donor, Sheldon Adelson, okay? But Sheldon Adelson has passed away. He's not with us anymore. So he doesn't have the money to give Trump anymore. And Trump only operates on bribes. So if you don't bribe him, he's not going to support you. And without that, I don't know what Trump does. So Israel is in much bigger trouble in America than they realize, politically.
Okay. So you think that if Donald Trump is getting elected once again, this time his relationship with Israel is going to be pretty much different than what it was back in 2016?
Yeah, let me be clear. There's no way of knowing. He's a madman. Whatever pops into his head, he does. Whatever he thinks is best for him, he does. So for now, he's mad at Netanyahu. For now, he doesn't have his top donor anymore telling him to be supportive of Israel. Okay, but and right now the Saudis are bribing him, so they are giving him all the money through the golf tournaments, and they gave his son-in-law $2 billion. So if the Saudis tell him to be pro-Israel, then he'll probably be pro-Israel. If the Saudis tell him to be anti-Israel, he might be anti-Israel. But anybody can buy Donald Trump. But to be fair to Trump, almost any country can buy any American politician. The corruption here is near 100%.
Okay. As you said, the young people in the United States and most of the Western world is going out for the rights of the Palestinian people, but the governments continue to not listen to them and do what they want. Uh, Basically, after what happened now, and considering what happened with Ukraine for 1.5 years, and the general rhetoric that was coming from the West was about the human rights and democracy, but this time it's the polar opposite of what they were saying. Do you think that the Western soft power and the Western diplomatic power is going to be decreasing in the near future? Do you think that countries in the Middle East, countries in Africa, in South America, willing to be listening what the Western countries have to say in other matters that around the world?
That's complicated because it depends on what leverage we choose to use with those countries. But if we choose not to use our leverage here in America, then that's a completely different story. I mean, without America bullying other countries, no one supports what Israel is doing. Maybe other governments that want to also do occupation and oppress minorities might support them, but barely any of those even really show up. And I hate that that's the case because I want Israel to be a great nation that is part of the world community. But as long as they keep occupying and oppressing 5 million Palestinians, of course the world is not going to accept that. Why would we accept that? That's crazy. So now look, here's where the real issue comes. After this 2024 election, it's possible that Israel will have affected this election in a negative way for one of the candidates. Again, if Joe Biden, for example, loses because he lost Michigan and the younger voters, then being in favor of Israel becomes a political liability. And that's just never happened in my lifetime before. And that would be an amazing thing to see. And then at that point, I don't know what happens, but I do know that it's both Democrats and Republican voters, both sides, are now saying, no, enough sending money to Israel to kill Palestinian children. We don't like that those bombs say made in the USA. And we want to take care of our own people here in America. Why are we sending another $14 billion to Israel for more war? So yes, the current people in charge, don't get me wrong, are definitely still massively in favor of Israel and will not change. But after the next election, it might be a completely different political landscape.
with your presidential candidacy, but first I want to ask you about Mr. Biden's presidency. For the last 3 years, before now, actually, in the 2020 elections, he managed to get a historic victory against Donald Trump, and not only get the presidency, but also managed to get the Congress from Republicans. But the 3 years that passed under him was quite a controversial one. It had a lot of economic difficulties. It had inflation. It had border problems. It had multiple wars that involved the United States to emerge. What do you think about the overall administration of Joe Biden?
Yeah. So Joe Biden has done some good things. So he passed an infrastructure bill, a COVID relief bill. There were some parts of those bills that it helped address climate change. So there were some good positive things that happened under Biden as well. But overall, as usual with most American politicians, he didn't deliver on the great number of things that he promised. And as usual with most American politicians, he delivered everything for his donors. But when he came to the voters, not so much. So there was a very important voting rights bill that would allow more people in America to vote. And they said it was their number one priority. He didn't even try. He didn't do it. There was a bill for higher wages. Didn't do it. Bill for paid family leave so moms can take some time off after they have a baby. Didn't do it. Even though these are all very, very popular. Okay. So can you believe in America that moms have to go to work the day after they deliver their baby? That's insane. Can you believe that in America, if you don't have health insurance that you paid for through private insurance, they'll just let you die in the streets? That's crazy. No other country that's developed or civilized has a system like that. People have no idea how barbaric the American form of capitalism is. It's basically corporations have taken over and they're driving everything down in terms of our wages, our health care, our standard of living, and executives are taking all of the profits home. So it's creating a system where there's a few very, very, very rich people and the rest of us. And that is why Trump won in the first place in 2016, because people are angry and they don't like this corporate rule. And all the regular politicians, all they ever give them is more corporate rule. So what did Joe Biden do? He did corporate rule. The wars helped defense contractors, oil companies, etc. They helped to take European, energy issues and needs and direct them towards American companies instead of Russian companies. So they were thrilled with how that war happened. Now, if you listen to American government officials, they'll tell you they didn't want Russia to invade Ukraine. But privately, they're quite thrilled about it. And so now, on the other hand, I'm fair. I think Biden did the right thing by withdrawing from Afghanistan. Yes, it was a little messy, but he at least had the courage to withdraw, which 20 years of presidents didn't in America. But overall, he has not delivered. That is why his popularity is down to 37%. His unfavorable number is 59%. That means he's 22 points in the negative. That's a disaster. That means he has almost no chance of winning the presidency. I don't know who's going to be president in 2024, but I know that it is very unlikely to be Joe Biden.
Okay. You mentioned you talked about Ukraine war. What do you think about the support that came from United States towards Ukraine? The war is going for 1.5 years now, and after the failed counteroffensive that happened during the last summer, there's a more grim picture coming from Ukraine. Do you think that United States can or will continue to support the Ukrainian cause for the next 1 year, 2 year, or however it takes?
I think support for Ukraine is still strong in America, but that's not the main problem. The main problem is the support for sending money for wars abroad is way down. People do not want to send money to other countries anymore, and they don't want to send it for war. So both the right wing and the left wing are getting tired of that. and all the polling shows the American people are starting to say, enough wars, enough spending abroad, spend at home. And whether you like that or you don't like that doesn't matter, because that's the direction America's going.
Yeah. I want to come to your presidency, your candidacy now. You announced your presidential candidacy, and it's quite fairly exciting to hear someone with a Turkish heritage to be running for presidency for 2024. You know that the relationship between Turkey and United States is quite sour nowadays. In a situation where you are the president, do you think that relationship is going to get better?
Well, it would depend on the actions of the Turkish government. I'm going to represent American interests, and if our interests match, then great. Obviously, being from a Turkish background, I have no reason for any hostility with Turkey. Turkey's the second biggest army in NATO and a strong ally, and has been for decades. So I hope that our alliance continues and is as productive as it can be.
Okay. And about the foreign issues with Israel, with Ukraine, how would you fix it? Biden is continuing a certain level of policies right now that made him quite unpopular with the American voter. How are you planning to change this? What can be done to stop these wars?
Yeah. So Ukraine and Israel are different, and different solutions. So in the case of Israel, I would say as long as you continue to bomb Gaza or occupy the Palestinians, you will get $0 from the United States of America. Not only am I not in favor of the extra 14 billion that America is now planning to send, I would actually cut all funding to Israel. Now, if Israel ends the occupation, then I'm happy to bring their funding back. Would be happy to give funding to the Palestinian state so they can grow and flourish and be peaceful and economically viable. That would help the entire region, and it would help the world, and it would help America. But I don't want U.S. taxpayer dollars being spent on oppression abroad. The American people are not in favor of it, and so the problem in America is that our politicians never do what the voters want. So I have a novel new idea. I'm just going to do what the voters want, and the voters don't want us to send any more money to Israel. So on Ukraine, the problem isn't Ukraine. The problem is the Pentagon. So just yesterday, for the 6th year in a row, the Pentagon could not pass an audit. That means that they have no idea where half the money is. But that's the biggest part of the American budget. Over $800 billion goes to the Pentagon. So they're saying, we don't know where $400 billion is. Well, I'm a businessman. I built my company, the Young Turks, from nothing to one of the top 10 news networks in America. I know how to run a budget. So I'm not going to accept, I don't know where $400 billion is. No, you're going to find out. Otherwise, you're not going to get that money. So these defense contractors in America have been robbing the American people blind for decades. I'm going to end that robbery. So if you can show me that the money is actually going to Ukraine and helping them to defend their country, as we promised them, then good, no problem. But if you say to me, oh, just give me more and more money and I'm going to send it to American defense contractors and maybe Ukraine gets it later. No, that's not going to happen.
Okay. I want to go back to year 2016, where Mr. Trump was elected, and the chaos that followed afterwards, where most of the Democrats were claiming that Russia interfered with the elections. Do you believe this? Do you think that Donald Trump administration has come to power because Russia interfered with the elections?
Yes and no. So yes, the Russians did interfere with the elections. They had a lot of propaganda on American media, American social media. But my guess is that a lot of countries do propaganda in America in both media and social media. So, I mean, look, we were just talking about Israel. There are a couple of lobbying groups, legendary in America, AIPAC, Democratic Majority for Israel. And they openly say that they are working on behalf of Israeli interests. And they spend an enormous amount of money in American politics. They influence elections much more than Russia does. But they're not alone. The Saudis send in a lot of money through think tanks. Qatar does. Honestly, if you're a foreign country and you're not trying to bribe American officials, you're not getting it. They're super easy to bribe, and so they're all doing it. And so it's not particularly any one country, but so yes, Russia did try to influence the election in 2016. Yes, they were in favor of Donald Trump, but did Donald Trump work with them? No, he didn't. Look, Trump is very even though he's a giant liar, he's very transparent. It's easy to tell what he actually wants and what he's going for. So with the Saudis, he said, they give me $30-40 million for my apartments. Am I not supposed to like them? So he's just saying, yeah, I want the money. I want the money. So if somebody gives me the money, I'm going to do whatever they want. So the guy's very, very clear. And so that's the state of American politics. So the Russians didn't have to buy off Donald Trump in the middle of the election, and they didn't. They could just buy him afterwards.
Yeah. I want to come to the rivalry between China and United States. During Mr. Trump's administration, we have seen him being pretty vocal about this rivalry getting bigger and bigger in the future. But Joe Biden continued this policy to a certain extent. We have seen the Nancy Pelosi visit to Taiwan and things getting more tense every year. What do you think about this rivalry? Do you think that United States should put a lot of sanctions to Beijing, or do you think that peaceful coexistence can be achievable?
Yeah, America picks too many fights with China. The politicians here are constantly blaming China for everything. It's absurd. Now, if you say, hey, COVID started in China, that's true. Okay. And if you say they were incompetent and what they did was dangerous and it hurt the whole world, yeah, that's true. Okay. What they're doing to Uyghurs in China is terrible. And they should get them out of those camps, and they should stop the human rights abuses. Okay. But we don't need to start more conflict and more war with China. It's ridiculous. We already have a giant economic relationship with China, and that's a good thing, because if you start a conflict, then people stop making money, and money makes the world go around. So I want more economic ties to China, not less, because it makes war less likely. So what should our policy be in regards to Taiwan and China? It should be the same policy we've always had, which is a balanced policy where we protect Taiwan, but we, allow China to state whatever their policy is in regards to Taiwan without starting needless conflict. So we have a policy that's worked for decades. There's no need to change it. And I think Nancy Pelosi going over to Taiwan to basically start more trouble was not at all helpful. And if you want to know why sometimes it seems like American politicians start trouble where there didn't need to be any in different parts of the world, it's because they all get huge campaign contributions from defense contractors. The more trouble there is, the more weapons that Taiwan has to buy from America. Who are they going to buy it from? Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. These American military contractors are some of the largest companies in the world, and they literally make money by starting conflicts and wars, and they use American politicians to do it. These are things that are obvious to all the voters, but in American media and politics, it was forbidden to say these things. If you said them, the media would basically keep you off the air. But I started my own media company, so they can't keep me off the air. And right now we get about 5 billion views a year. So what are you going to do now?
Yeah. I want to go back to your presidency, your presidential candidacy. It's clear that there is a major obstacle in front of you. You being a person who born in Turkey, in Istanbul, is going to be an obstacle for you in the eyes of the US Constitution. But you said that you have a path to overcome this obstacle. And from what we have seen in some states, you are having problems with putting your name on the ballot, like Nevada. And there are some states that you managed to overcome that problem, and you put, like in Arkansas. So how is this going to work out? How are you
Yeah.
planning to overcome this obstacle?
All my life, people have told me that what I'm going to do is impossible. And then I do it. And then after I do it, they say, well, that was inevitable. Really? Uh, so we started the first ever YouTube show. And at the time, people said, that's crazy. Then I said, no, we're going to beat television. They said, that's the craziest thing we've ever heard. And then we beat television. And we became #1 on YouTube. We're the first we're the largest news company online in the whole world. We're the oldest internet show in world history. And so I give you that as an example of the things that are not impossible. And so in the case of my presidency, they said I couldn't get on any ballots. But now I'm on ballots in places like Arkansas. So apparently it wasn't impossible. I was right all along. And we're going to go to the Supreme Court. And we're going to challenge the Supreme Court to fix this. Because in reality, the US Constitution amended the original part of the Constitution that said that natural born citizens cannot run for president. In the 14th Amendment, and that's what amendments do, they amend and change the original Constitution. The 14th Amendment, it says that all persons born or naturalized have equal protection of the laws. They were very clear. So we're going to force the Supreme Court to make a decision. Are you going to treat all naturalized citizens from all across the world who are now American citizens, fully American citizens, are you going to treat us as second-class citizens? Or are you going to finally say, sorry, you guys are right, you're all 100% American? We're going to test that, and we're going to win that case.
Okay, I have one last question for you. In a situation where you couldn't overcome this problem, where you either get turned from the Supreme Court or you simply lost to Joe Biden or any other candidate, what are you going to do? Are you going to support Mr. Biden, or you are going to support another candidate? What's your plan?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would never support Donald Trump. So whoever has the best chance of defeating Donald Trump is the person that I'm going to support. And sometimes people say, well, you know, if you have two choices that you don't like, maybe you should sit out the election. No. You pick the best of the choices that you have. Good news is right now, during the primaries, you have a lot of choices. So there's no reason to go with Joe Biden, who's almost definitely going to lose to Donald Trump. You can go to cenkforamerica.com and support me if you're an American citizen. And so there's no reason why we can't beat Joe Biden. Do you know that when Donald Trump started his first presidential run in 2015, the first poll, he started at 1%, and he just climbed up through the media until he won. So that is a path that is definitely doable, especially against a super weak candidate like Joe Biden. But if it turns out that Joe Biden does win the primary and he's up against Donald Trump, and he's our only chance of beating Donald Trump, then of course I'm going to vote for him because Trump is a bigger danger. So I don't think that's a hard question.